I was at a coffee shop and a random guy held up the line because he only had 100. After he got his change, he tipped the cashier $10 and paid for the people behind him. Reddit. Are there any strangers that you thought were buttholes but they then made you completely re-evaluate your opinion? I was once sitting in a movie theater with my friend, and we were the only people there. An enormously tall guy came in and sat directly in front of us. Then he turned around and said just kidding and moved. Oh man, I wish I was tall just so I could do that. When I was a kid, my parents were driving me somewhere and this dude was driving like a madman. Twice the speed limit, honking his horn, cutting people off, smacking into curbs. My dad cursed him out. The guy drove off, and we forgot about it. Only a block or two later we're passing a small regional hospital and we see this guy's car stopped out front. The driver emerged wearing paint-stained overalls and t-shirt, construction worker type outfit, and he has a rag wrapped around one hand, soaked through and oozing blood everywhere. I'm going to guess nail gun to the hand. Of the people that I know who use them, 2/3 of them have had this happen at some point. I have no idea how they do it. I was driving out of a gas station and I stopped for a few seconds, 2-3 tops, to check my mirrors and the guy behind me honks his horn at me. I was shocked that someone could be in such a rush that 2 seconds would give them reason to honk at me. I turn around to look at this guy and he's walking up to my car. I roll down the window to start yelling at him but before I can he tells me that I had left my gas tank open. I thanked him, closed my tank, then went on my merry way. Soccer mom moment. Well, this guy wasn't being an butthole but more of a fatus. At least I thought, but I saw a guy going through the buffet at CC's Pizza and got a mountain of pizza and took all the good stuff and, being a kid at the time, I thought he was just fat and ate too much. After I got through the line, I was walking to my table and saw the same guy sitting at a table with 3 elderly ladies and he was passing out his pile of pizzas to them and helping them get all their drinks and other stuff too. Seeing that as a kid taught me to not judge a book by his cover, in a way, as cliche as that is. He was fattening his prey. Once when I was about 12, I asked my mom to take me to the store to get something I had been saving up for. She had a couple errands to run and said she'd be back in a few minutes. We live in a small town, no big deal. Upon entering the store, an old man who seemed to be homeless and smelled of dumpsters rushed in before me as the door slammed. I thought it was mean but continued along. When I finally got the item and stood in line, I had forgotten about tax. The cashier said I needed $0.21. I panicked and thought I could dash outside to ask my mom but I'd lose my place in line and hold up everyone. A hand then reached out with the $0.21 I needed. From no other than the man from earlier. He was holding bandages, crackers, water, and some gauze pads. He smiled and winked. I thanked him and realized in that moment you should never judge someone entirely by their appearance. Once a waiter had some teenagers come in 10 minutes to closing time and order water and coffee, staying over half an hour. I was fuming and having a bad day already since my girlfriend had left me a few days earlier, only to show up that day and take the cook home with her. So naturally, this was the last thing I wanted to deal with. The kids leave, and on the way out, one of them says to me, "I'm sorry, friend. Please try to have a good night." I head over to the table and he left me a $30 tip. Happened to me on night 2005. Was a waitress and had a table come in like 15 minutes before close. They had appetizers and champagne. I was trying to get to a New Year's Eve party and I was really bummed out. Finally, they left, apologized for staying so late and wished me a happy new year. I went back to clear the table and they'd left me $100. I cried. Yeah, I remember this guy who came up to me asking for money as I was waiting at the bus stop. I was wearing a backpack, catching the bus home from college. Obviously I wasn't rolling in dough to be handing out money. I was pretty annoyed. I didn't think he was an butthole, but he was annoying. He told me he needed money for the bus. Being the bleeding heart that I am, I reached into my pocket to give him some money. I only had two $1 for my bus fare and two $5 bills. I decided what the heck, I'll give him a 5. He took the 5 and said, "Oh, hold on 1 second." Then he reached into his bag and gave me a handful of soggy boxes of frozen goods, chicken tenders, pizza roll-ups, etc. I didn't want them, but I thought it was a sweet gesture. I had this guy all wrong. Then he said that's gotta be worth at least another $5 and he stuck his hand out to receive more money. I was wrong. He was in butthole after all. To top it all off, when the bus came, he didn't even freaking get on. This story took me on a roller coaster ride of emotion and I commend you for it. A couple of years ago I was collecting money from drivers by an intersection from a charity. A young African American guy with long hair who was listening to loud music pulled up and stopped at the red light. An older man I was working with who was standing down the street said something along the lines of some people, you just know they're not going to want to give anything, to me with a chuckle. Next thing I know, the guy gets out of the car. We had been going to the windows of the other cars to collect the donations, and hands him a 20. Definitely a story I'll remember for a long time. Just say black guy man. It makes us feel weird when you say African American. I was pulling out from the grocery store when this guy pulls right behind me and starts laying on his horn. I had backed out of my parking space a little slowly and thought he was being a butthole about it. So I flipped him off and yelled a few things out the window. He just stares at me then points to my roof. Left a case of soda on top of the car. Got it. Crawled into my car and died. Breathe in. Breathe out. If this ever happens again, please. 1. Swallow pride. 2. Apologize honestly. Oh crap. I'm sorry. I thought you were honking at me to move. Thank you. Sorry. Have a good one. 3. Go about your life. A whole lot of people can sympathize with that feel, but your actions make all the difference. Step 2 is the reason this thread exists. When I was in the Amazon, we visited a local village where the women and girls were selling woven baskets. I found one I liked that was made of dyed grasses and porcupine quills, and offered the woman $30 for it. She was very elderly and spoke broken Spanish. As I turned to go, she held out a necklace to me made of piranha shells and seeds. Thinking she was trying to get more money out of me, I said no gracious. She kept shaking the necklace at me. The guide had to explain she meant the necklace to be a gift and said it was supposed to give protection to travelers. I felt choked up after that. It's a worthless, ugly necklace, but I felt so bad that I was mistaking kindness for greed in those poor people. Later I learned more about the history of the region and realized that they were probably indigenous refugees from a rubber camp. It's a worthless, ugly necklace. Not to the old woman who crafted that sumbitch by hand. I was on a rafting trip with some buddies that was run by a local outdoors center located on the river. Riding the bus a few miles up the river to the put-in point, we were seated behind the biggest douchebag looking guy I've ever encountered at close range. About 20 years old, he vaguely resembled the situation, but his carefully oiled hair was topped by an immaculate white baseball cap with a carefully hand-curved brim. He was accompanied by 2 big hair girls who laughed nervously whenever he told a joke. Anyway, after everybody gets in our rafts or inner tubes, we scatter as we go down the river, and I didn't see him again until we'd reached the takeout point, next to the outdoor center. That's where I discovered that I'd lost my car keys somewhere on the river and our phones and wallets are locked in the car. We're preparing to settle down to an aggravating hour waiting for a locksmith or tow truck, when the douchebag appears. He can see from across the parking lot that we've got a situation, and he trots over, sees a problem, then goes back to the shining chrome tool chest on the back of his jacked up pickup truck and quickly fabricates a gizmo, not a Slim Jim, for pressing the lock control button. Door unlocks. We cheer and offer him a $5 or a beer, and he smiles graciously and says just happy to help somebody today before he climbs up into his truck with his 2 adoring chickas and drives away. The douchebag was an awesome guy, and I haven't forgotten that lesson. Had a situation. Nice. I was working as a waiter on a cruise ship that toured the lakes near my house. As you can guess, there's a certain time the boat takes off, and if you're not on it, you're sole. Well, this one time we were 15 minutes out and we had to turn around and pick up a group. Turns out the guy running it had been late and his party of 10 had missed the boat. He had convinced our GM we had to come back and pick him up. So at this point a lot of passengers are really angry and the staff is annoyed because it has screwed up our time. The leader of the group gets on the boat, walks up to the bar and announces, in front of 80 plus other people, "Here's my credit card. For the next 30 minutes, all drinks are on me." He ended up tipping the bar and his server very well to make up for the delay. TLDR, guy misses a lake cruise ship, has it turned around, makes up for it by getting other passengers soused and tipping well. Here's my credit card. For the next 30 minutes, all drinks are on me. Classiest line ever. I was holding up a line with 100 once. Basically, I was halfway to work when I got a text that the alarm was going off at home and I need to go and set it. I was a dishwasher in a restaurant, and about 3/4 of my income went to bills, so I wasn't really thrilled about getting off and paying for another bus home, then a bus back, and possibly getting my pay docked for being about an hour late. But I had to do it, and it was probably our cat that set it off. And now stuck inside crapping all over the place with fare. So, I went into a cafe to try to get some change for a bus home. My 10-trip ticket was for a $4 fare. From here to home was a $1.50 fare. No can do. You have to buy something to draw out cash. And I couldn't afford anything from a cafe because I worked in cafes. So I go down the road and back. I can't see any other option than to break the $100 my flatmate gave me for rent. I go back into the cafe and ask if I can break it, but this will take all their change early in the day. There's nothing else near I can do, so I'm forced to buy a coffee that costs an hour of my wages after tax. On a 30-hour week, I finally get my change, and there's now about 5 people in suits all growling and angry that I was delaying their morning cappuccino by 20 seconds while we count the change out, because it was a lot of small notes. The staff were rude, the coffee was overheated so the milk was bitter, and I'm sure it was done on purpose, because, like, I work in cafes and that's one of the few things a barista can do for revenge. I got home, disabled the alarm, cuddled the cat and let her out, and made my way back to work almost an hour late. Naturally, the boss didn't talk to me for 2 hours, then grilled me once he had made his point. After he calmed down, I told him about my morning and everything that happened. He pointed out that they get their pastries from us. He held their order the next day for 2 hours. Then when their chef called to ask what's going on, he explained that he had no dishwasher second chef for the lunch prep because they wouldn't let me draw out $2 or split $100, resulting in us being behind schedule and having to leave the pastries for the morning rather than prep them the night before. And he told them how I thought the coffee was crap too, and I could do better. Haha. I actually got to work and threw it out, made my own. Their manager actually came in and introduced himself to me, apologized, and told me to pop in with a girlfriend for a free coffee next time I'm in the area. Pop in with a girlfriend. Dang, there's always a catch. When I was about 13, I was on a plane as we landed into what I think was JFK. While we were getting out of the aisles and everyone was taking their time waiting for the front row to go first, some guy comes bursting from the back, pushing people aside and angrily making his way to the exit. Thought he was a total douche. Later, while my family and I were picking up our luggage, I saw the same guy sobbing at the lost items section. I overheard that the airline had lost his father's coffin and the funeral was that day in a couple of hours. Just yesterday I saw a dude on his cell phone in a nice BMW 7 Series. He wasn't moving and the light was green with nobody in front of him and he was in the middle of both lanes. Pretty douchy. As I drove closer, I noticed there was a family of ducks crossing and he wanted to make sure that nobody went through, as they happened to be crossing just after a fairly sharp turn on a 40-mile-per-hour street. Definitely made me think again about my initial reaction. Months ago I visited a Starbucks. My niece, who's 9, is allergic to gluten, so she can't eat or drink about 90% of all the stuff in restaurants and cafes. You can imagine how hard this is for a 9-year-old. Fully expecting to be treated as usual, sir. I really don't have time for this. I asked the manager if they had something gluten-free for my gorgeous niece. I'll make this short. The manager smiled, sat down with me and went through a list with all ingredients of all Starbucks products. She talked to me for about half an hour, and in the end we had compiled a list of products, frappuccinos, etc. My niece can eat, drink in any Starbucks around the world. Needless to say, I was speechless. Not only is that really nice, but it's good business too. He's just ensured that whenever your niece wants a coffee, she'll be sure to go into a Starbucks with her list. This one guy made billions of dollars in computers using unfair, often predatory business practices. Then he retired and spent his days trying to wipe out malaria and other incredibly dangerous diseases. Bill Gates. I had a similar experience today. This person wasn't being an butthole, but I definitely judged her and thought she was white trash. I was at Target buying groceries. I saw a woman, pretty overweight, with a big tattoo of SpongeBob and Squidward on her back. I thought, oh geez, this is internet gold, so I asked her if I could snap a picture, claiming I was a huge SpongeBob fan and loved it. It took all my willpower to keep a straight face, wanted to laugh so badly, as I took the picture and then walked away. By chance, I ended up in the same checkout lane as her and her family. I talked to her a little bit and found out that her son, who was with her, was chronically ill and their family got to go on the Nickelodeon family cruise as his wish from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Their entire family got SpongeBob tattoos to commemorate their happy memory with the sick son. Needless to say, I felt terrible and nearly wanted to cry. I felt so stupid and judgmental that my first instinct was to label her as a piece of white trash with a regrettable tattoo. So that's my tale. Don't judge a book by its cover, folks. TLDR. I judged a woman as white trash for her SpongeBob tattoo, but it turned out the tattoo commemorated a Nickelodeon Make-A-Wish cruise with her chronically ill son. As far as training yourself out of being judgmental, browsing Reddit doesn't help. When I read held up, I started thinking he had a gun, as in this is a hold up, so I was slightly surprised that your opinion of this thief would change so swiftly. This reminds me of that one extremely wanted cartel leader who goes into restaurants and has his armed guards take everybody's phones and block the doors. When he leaves, he returns everything and pays for everybody's meals. My cousin was running a charity golf tournament. I think it was for Wound Warriors, and George W. Bush showed up unannounced and without camera crews or anything. He stayed for a few hours talking with people and taking pictures with them, then dropped a $100,000 check on the way out. He did a lot of fricked up crap as president. Maybe Cheney was to blame. Not a Republican or Bush supporter by any stretch, BTW. I like to think of Bush as a lovable simpleton that Cheney installed as a figurehead. I got a filthy look and grunt of disgust from a bus driver when I paid a £2 bus fare with a £5 note. I thought that was okay, but lesson learned. Don't worry, everyone gets that from every bus driver. When I started working at my job as dishwasher in a cafe, this lady, who worked as baker, yelled at me for dropping a bowl. Later she brought me muffins and a scone. We are now friends. 2 weeks ago, a guy pulled out right in front of me while driving. There was of course no one behind me, but he decided it would be better to cut me off. But then something crazy happened. He realized his mistake. He put his hand out the window as a sign of an apology. Nearly soiled myself in disbelief. Road rage avoided. I let him live. Gave you the right of wave. Always makes me feel instantly better. This is just a little thing, but it made an impression on me because of how I'd misjudged the situation. I was in a fabric store to get material for something I was making, and because the line at the cutting station was long, I decided to go shopping for other things while carrying around the giant bolt of fabric. I was looking at zippers when this old woman approached me from the other end of the aisle. She eyed the huge amount of fabric and demanded, "Is it on sale?" A bunch of things flashed through my head at this point. Does she think I'm stupid enough to be buying this whole thing? Does she think that because I'm young I only have money to buy fabric that's on sale? Does she have her eye on the same fabric? Why is it any of her business anyway? I paused for a second and said, "No, it's not on sale." Immediately, her face brightened. "Good, then I have a coupon for you." She handed me a coupon for 50% off original price fabric. She had been looking around the store for someone to give the coupon to. It made enough of a difference that I got the rest of my supplies for what it would have cost to buy all the fabric at its original price. My friend dresses up in a gothic punk style. People always judge her because of the way she dresses, but really she's a very nice girl. She doesn't have much money at all, still at uni, only a part-time job to pay for her guitar's gigs. We went shopping and she only had a $50 on her. That was her entire budget. She gave the whole $50 to charity before even entering the shopping mall. I couldn't believe it. Even though I know she is nice, this act made me realize how generous some people are. People shouldn't judge. Even if someone gives up a lot of money, it doesn't mean that they are rich. Welp, let's go home. Sort of the same deal. Really busy time in my city at the time. Huge concert that literally doubles the population of that small city for a couple days, and someone was at a drive-thru ordering like 3 large boxes of coffee, donuts, food. I was unbelievably nearly late for work and was about to drive over the curb and leave when he finally finished getting plus paying for his order after at least 15 minutes. Went up to the window and found out he had paid for everyone in the line as well. Got to work barely on time and all went better than expected. I was in a ping pong tournament one day and my partner that I have been training with for a couple of months decides to drop out. It was a doubles tournament. So standing around partnerless, I was scoping out for other people that looked good. Out of nowhere, this old guy, probably 60 plus, comes up to me and asks to be my partner. I started to think, wow, this guy probably can't even see the ball. But this was my last chance to get a partner and time was running out. I grudgingly said okay and we signed up. I knew we were going to lose and already planned on blaming my partner for dropping out. We get up to our first game in doubles against 2 young adults who looked really good. I thought for sure we lost. It turns out that my partner was the national senior ping pong champion and we beat the 2 kids 21-13. We made it all the way to the finals and almost won. Although this might sound cliche, but never judge a book by its cover. Just last night, my friend and I were filming a wedding for a client, and we thought the photographer and his assistant were complete shats. See, just this year, my friend and I started a video production company and found a really good market for weddings. We're off to a pretty good start, but we're still relatively unheard of among some of the local professionals. We're also in our early 20s, so we're kinda used to getting some initial skepticism from the more established peers that we work with. Well, the main photographer is a guy in his late 30s and had some really high-end gear and obviously knew what he was doing. When he looked at us, rather looked through us, he turned around to his assistant, a guy roughly our age, and said, "Here we go." He then spent the day bossing the bride and groom around seemingly without respect and hardly acknowledged us at all. And when he did, it was pretty short and abrasive. Later that night though, we were all at the reception and everything was winding down. He comes up, tells us that he hopes my friend and I are getting paid more than him because of how much work we were doing between the two of us. My friend and I manned 6 cameras at the wedding and reception to guarantee good coverage and variety, saying something like, "You better not be getting paid less than $8,000 for the amount of work you guys have been putting in." He then we find out his assistant was actually a guy that had just started his own photography business, and the main guy was helping show him the ropes. In the process of the conversation, he tells us about how frustrated he was about this wedding being really unorganized. Everyone was running late, established itinerary was completely disregarded, and there were a bunch of frustrating rules to abide by at the church we were filming at. So he had to just take charge to make sure he got all the pictures that they wanted, all while trying to stay out of the way for our video. A video he didn't even know was being taken until we showed up. We already felt pretty bad at this point about all the little comments we made to each other about this guy, but then this butthole decides to make us feel even worse about misjudging him. It turns out he's on the main council for one of the bridal expos here in town, where a bunch of wedding related business go to advertise their services. We've rented our space at this particular expo several times before, and this jackass decides to offer us a free space for the next expo, all because he enjoyed the conversation with us so much and was really impressed at our work ethic. What a jerk, right? TLDR. This jackass helped us save 15% by switching to Geico. I fail to see how him only having a $100 bill makes him an butthole. I also fail to see how him wanting to break it at a coffee shop is out of line, assuming that was even the purpose of his visit, rather than just being caught with no small bills at the wrong time. He turned out to be extremely generous, but none of you had any cause to get huffy. If your world is tipped upside down by a few minutes extra in line for your coffee, then you seriously need to reevaluate your priorities. I used to work retail. In the morning we had exactly $100 in our tills. Most of it was change. When you come in very early in the morning, there is a good chance that we have to go to the safe to make change. If you come in at 5 PM, I'll be happy to give you change in any dang denomination you could want. I was on vacation with my dad at some historical site in the middle of nowhere, and there is this group of local teen boys whooping it up nearby. As we are driving away, they come speeding down the road after us, making noise and gestures. I think they're being aggressive idiot country boys fricking with the out of staters. Turns out they were trying to tell us we had driven off with my dad's new $500 camera on the roof, which we were thankfully able to save. TLDR. Butthole teenagers are really trying to keep us from losing our camera. Sometimes servers or people in general think I will tip like crap because I am a teenager. I'm a server, make more than I need, and tip exuberantly. I get treated worse than other customers sometimes, and I just tip well anyway. I hope they change their opinions of teens. I used to work in a children's theater program that was run by a prominent local figure who had a large family of kids who all participated in the program, making them somewhat celebrities around the theater. One day, I happened to be walking by when I saw one of the older siblings, probably in his late teens, talking to some other kids, and he was going off about some Mexican he encountered, and went on about how lazy those people are, questioning his legality, amongst other various stereotypes. I walked away thinking that this kid somehow turned into a huge butthole, despite how nice the rest of the family was. A few weeks later, I happened to end up working at the theater program's one-act shorts night, where kids direct and act in various short plays, and after a few, the lights come up, and this kid is on stage. They start going through the scene, and eventually, he starts talking about the Mexicans, and saying the same stuff I had heard him talking about before, and it was then that it clicked that what I had witnessed was a rehearsal, and the other kids were the other actors in the scene with him. If I hadn't chanced into seeing the performance, I would, to this day, think he was an butthole instead of knowing that he was just a really good actor. I was on my way home from Helsinki on an 8-hour flight and I was pretty tired, so I tried falling asleep. At first I leaned my head against the seat, but the man in front kept moving and reclining and I was starting to get a little irritated. After a couple hours of moving restlessly, the man stood up next to his seat for an hour or so but kept the seat reclined. This was really starting to pee me off by this point. But when I got up to go to the bathroom, I noticed that the man was standing up so his kid could use his seat to lay down on. To that good father out there, I'm sorry I misjudge you, and keep up the good parenting. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.